أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد. As Muslims, sometimes we begin with a prayer, and that prayer that I said in Arabic, it translates to the following. We seek refuge with Allah, God, from the shaitan, Iblis, Lucifer, the accursed. We speak in the name of God, who describes himself as Ar-Rahman, the one who is overwhelmingly compassionate, Nir-Rahim, the one who is the most beneficent. And we say that all praises belong to God, who is the Lord of everything in the heaven and the earth, and we send peace and blessings upon the Prophet and those who are righteously guided. My name is Faizan Syed, and I am the Executive Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations here in the state of Missouri. And other than having the longest name, are many organizations that actually shortens to CAIR-Missouri. What I do for a living is my goal and task to defend American Muslims against discrimination that happens in the workplace, in public, in schools, or wherever that might be. And a little bit about myself: I was born in Lahore, Pakistan, which is right next to India, the entire country of India, of course. And I moved to Kirkwood, Missouri, when I was about 4 years old. And I grew up there ever since. After graduating from Kirkwood, I went to Drake University, which is in Des Moines, Iowa. Yeah, go Bulldogs, that's right. And if any of you have been to Drake, it's a beautiful area. You go through hundreds of miles of cornfield, beautiful beef, and you then get to the university. And when I went to Drake, I was studying astronomy, physics, and mathematics, which are the best ways to become a millionaire once you graduate. And then during that time, I realized that it was 2008. And it was at the time of the Iowa caucus. So during the caucus, all these presidential candidates, they go over to the middle of nowhere, Iowa, because Iowa is the first caucus. So I had the ability to meet a lot of these really tremendous politicians that many of you know about today, including a young senator who happens to be our president, who's unfortunately a Muslim, and he's trying to impose Sharia law in this country. But I got to meet him before he was like that. And was interesting is as that time I switched my majors to the best major, which is politics and history, another way to make $1 million as well. And it was during this time that even though I grew up in the United States, I never witnessed or really saw or experienced Islamophobia. But then after 2008, and more so in 2010, we saw a dramatic change within the nation. We saw the mainstreaming of Islamophobia within inside the country. And the mainstreaming of Islamophobia took form in a few different areas, a few different ways. And part of it, well, that Islamophobia always exists. You go on YouTube, find a video of cute kittens, you'll read the comment section, you'll realize people hate everything. So people also don't like Muslims. But the mainstreaming of Islamophobia that we've seen rise over the last 6 years primarily is a result of a few factors. Primarily, the greatest factor is the acceptance of Islamophobia as mainstream platform by political party within inside this country. In 2010 specifically, you saw a few controversies rising in this country. One of them was the Ground Zero Mosque in New York City, which became a national story. Should there be a mosque so near Ground Zero, even though there was already a mosque closer to Ground Zero? And let's not forget, Muslims happen to work in the Twin Towers, and there was actually spaces for them to pray inside those towers. But again, that's propaganda from my part. And beyond that, we also saw another issue happening, which is you saw a rise in legislation, specifically called anti-Sharia legislation, which in some states, such as Tennessee, that if you're caught practicing Sharia, that they would become a felony up to several years in prison. And what's interesting about these types of legislation is that they spread across the country, including our great state of Missouri as well. And it was at that time, when I graduated from college and I was overwhelmed with job opportunities, that I saw one group always being targeted on TV, and that was CAIR. Right? Everybody hated CAIR. Everybody was targeting CAIR. So that's the group I have to work for. I think they've got something right going on. So I applied and I started working with them in 2010, 2011. And the first main job that I had was in Joplin, Missouri. And in Joplin, for those of you might remember, there's an F5 tornado that hit Joplin, destroyed 1/3 of the entire city. And I don't know if you've ever seen the aftermath of a tornado like that, but just seeing 1/3 of a community being devastated is quite shocking. I was there 2 days later. Muslims from across that region lived and prayed and slept in that mosque and ate at that mosque to help rebuild. 1 year after that, on July the 4th, somebody came and threw a Molotov cocktail at the Islamic Center. Then 1 month after that, the 10 last days of Ramadan, somebody came and burned the Islamic Center to the ground. The first time an Islamic Center had been totally burned to the ground inside the United States. And it was shocking when I was there the day after it burned to the ground and witnessing the 46 families that lived in that community and seeing a place that I had slept in, that I had worked in, just reduced to ashes and rubble, seeing parts of the Quran burned totally except for a few pages as well. And that's when it really hit me, the mainstreaming of Islamophobia within this country and how it has an impact in causing action that we see within this area. The man who burned down the Islamic Center, not only his name is Jebediah Stout, not only did he burn down that particular Islamic Center, but he was caught because he was trying to bomb abortion clinics as well. And that's how the FBI caught this particular gentleman. The mainstreaming of Islamophobia is something we've seen happen particularly within the last 6 years. After September 11th, you saw a dramatic 250% rise in anti-Muslim attacks. But then a year after that, that level went down to before 9/11 levels. And then it wasn't until really 2009, 2010 that we saw an increase, and now the levels today are twice as much as after September the 11th. The question is why? The answer, well, there's many answers to that, but primarily the answer is that Islamophobia has always existed, but it's now become a tool that's very effective at mobilizing masses of people to believe that their country is being taken over by a foreign threat, to believe that they're physically at harm. That's Noman said 49% of Americans are actually worried about being killed by Islamic terrorists, that there's a xenophobic rise within this country, an anti-Muslim rise within this country, and these strategies are extremely, extremely effective at winning votes, winning elections, and winning popularity. I just got my 5-minute run. Whenever you give these type of talks, they'll always be like, hey, you'll never get a sign that says, you're doing great, 5 extra minutes, right? They're always like, stop talking, get off the stage, right? So what we've seen happen is that these strategies have been extremely effective. It's very difficult for a politician to go on stage and say, well, the recent recession that hit us was actually a part of failed economic policy that we, in fact, voted on. That's the reason why many people became homeless in the country today. It's very difficult to say that wages have been stagnating for several years, that 90% of all the wealth that's been generated in this great country has gone to 1% of the population. It's very difficult to tell people that the jobs you used to have are basically being replaced by machines, industry, and outsourcing. It's very difficult to do that, but it's much easier to say that Muslims, right? Black Lives Matter people, they're terrorists. They're basically burning and looting. It's very easy to have that type of rhetoric, which is why you see that type of rhetoric being used, because it is effective. It's an effective tool in order to win an election. How effective is it? Well, let's look at our very wonderful state of Missouri. When I first started working with CAIR, we had the anti-Sharia legislation inside the state of Missouri. And the first writing of that legislation basically said that Islamic religious practice will not be allowed in the state of Missouri. That's unconstitutional. And then that was, for some reason, discovered to be extremely against the First Amendment of the Constitution and very unconstitutional. So then they changed it to saying that no foreign law that doesn't give you the same protection as Missouri law will be allowed in the state of Missouri, which is a very odd thing to state. But of course, we fought it and we were able to defeat it on multiple occasions. In this recent campaign election, we've had many candidates using Islamophobia and also the fear of Syrian refugees as mainstream platforms, such as Eric Greitens. He used a campaign that he was basically selling ISIS hunting permits. The reason that's dangerous is because the average American doesn't know the difference between ISIS and where Pakistan is in the Middle East. They don't know anything about anything. And when you give somebody that type of permit, yeah, you laugh, but when you give these people this type of permit, it creates an opportunity that people who have these biases, the only ISIS-similar person they're going to see is a Muslim woman wearing the hijab on the street. And then they might take action against that. We've also seen in many of these campaigns anti-Syrian refugee rhetoric. So for example, whether it's the gubernatorial race, the treasurer race, so on and so forth, many of the campaigns, they would boast that they kept Missouri safe from dangerous Syrian refugees, even though St. Louis has welcomed over 386 Syrian refugees. So I'm not sure how safe they kept this going. One of the portion of my talk that I want to talk is, what can you do as attorneys, actually most of you aren't attorneys, as future attorneys or some of you who are attorneys, what can you do to counter this ill effect that's happening within our state and within our country? Well, actually, there's a lot that you can do, a tremendous amount. The first is when you see something, lawyers are known for speaking and being very good vocalists. So you should be willing to speak out against mainstreaming and public displays of Islamophobia. So for example, when Eric Wheaton made the ISIS hunting permit, we had the South Asian Bar Association that Aman's a part of. We also had other bar associations come out and specifically call that out as being anti-Muslim bigotry and racism, along with sort of the anti-xenophobic messages that they had. So when you see something, use your associations, use the school, and call these statements out, because these are tremendously troubling, and it does lead to acts of violence against the American Muslim community. One simple example is in Kansas City, 3 men were arrested by the FBI, and myself and my relation with the FBI is not the best relationship, just because they do something that I don't particularly agree with. If you want to talk about that, I can give one later. So the FBI arrested these 3 men, and they were charged with trying to blow up and massacre Somali immigrants who live in Wichita, Kansas, and to do basically a shooting spree and a bloodbath in that area. So first, speaking out against this type of action is important. Secondly, assisting organizations like CAIR with legislation that on its very face can be very Islamophobic. So for example, the anti-Sharia legislation that happened in the state of Missouri, the last iteration of that, the ACLU of Missouri, the American Civil Liberties Union Missouri, they came out, and they're being extremely intelligent people. They realized, hey, wait a second. This legislation would prohibit foreign adoptions, and because it would prohibit foreign adoptions, we can't have it passed, and that's why the Governor Jay Nixon vetoed that. I would never figure that out, but being good lawyers who study from St. Louis University Law School, you guys can figure that stuff out. A third way to do it is, if those of you who are interested in getting involved in specific lawsuits that have to deal with anti-Muslim bigotry, you can work, of course, for organizations like CAIR. We have our full-time attorney named Robert West. He's actually a graduate of St. Louis University Law School, and we're always hiring law clerks. We just filed a lawsuit earlier this week. We filed another lawsuit the week before, and we're probably going to file a lawsuit next week to keep on a weekly trend. So these are a few actions that a person can do in order to take it. And the last step is, don't underestimate your amazing potential and ability as lawyers, because you're the ones that help to, not necessarily create the law, but help to defend the law when the law has been violated against people, whether it's minorities or whether it's anybody else. Use your skills that you have. Use that skill set, speak out in public, and be a defense against the rising Islamophobia that we see. Because as long as elected officials can gain votes using fear of other people, scapegoating and whatnot, this trend is only going to increase, and it's not going to end with this election campaign no matter who wins it. And that is something we have to realize. And secondly, remember, this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. That the challenge that we face today is going to be with you when you're older, it's going to be with you when you probably have children, and it's going to be a systemic problem that we as a country need to go through. Just that racism is a systematic problem. And I think once we realize that, we can have a tremendous impact and ability to change that as well. With that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.